Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. I know this is Thursday, the last day of Ignite, pretty much. So thank you so much for sticking around till the evening. We're going to talk about how we want to use analytics to drive Microsoft 365 adoption. Now, as you will see on the screen, there are two words that I'm talking about. There is adoption, and there is analytics, which means data. So why am I talking to you adoption? So think about a story. So say John, someone in your organization who is possibly an IT admin, or possibly someone who is in charge of looking at adoption within their organization, and the IT decision maker comes to him and says, John, what do you think we are getting out of Microsoft 365? Like, we are investing possibly millions of dollars in it. Next month, I'm going to write a check to renew that subscription. Why should I do it? And John has to have something to answer this question to. And what do you use that for? You have to have data to back anything that you say. So that kind of goes back to why we are talking about data and adoption to go with it. Because we want to help you understand the value that you are getting out of Microsoft 365, to get you visibility firstly on what you're doing, where you are today, and also give you tools, also give you data, ammunition to go and make use of it even more. Now, let's dive into what we have today. And some of the things that we are trying to follow as principles are, firstly, we want to be transparent. All of this that you're looking forward, like on your screen, is your data. So we want to be transparent about using your data to drive adoption for you so that you get the most out of what you're paying for. Secondly, we want to build trust with you. It's like we want you to be equal partners in our journey together, because we go back to our mission of making you the most productive selves. We think that's a journey we cannot do alone. That's a journey in which we have to be partners in it. And the third piece is we want to make this data as actionable for you as possible. We don't only want to give you an aggregate level number, say 59%, and I don't know what I can do with it. So we want to give you actionable data that you can actually go do things with. So what you're looking at right now is, as it stands today, Microsoft 365 Usage Analytics. Possibly some of you are already aware of what it is. If not, then please talk to me after the session. I can help you get set up, and because this will at least give you a very good glance into where you are today with using Microsoft 365. So what you're looking at is two of the three endpoints that we offer for usage analytics. The first is usage analytics within the admin center. So these are product and service level usage reports, where you will have aggregate level data about your organization, but we also offer you user level details on how are people using that product. The second piece is the Power BI. We used to have a content pack, which had a lot of aggregate level, again, and user level details on how people were using Microsoft 365. We have moved away from a content pack and moved to a template app technology. Two reasons for that. One was we were trying to get rid of some visuals which were not certified, tiny little detail. And secondly, it allows users, more importantly, to customize the views. And since we had this opportunity to actually move to a different technology, we also took this opportunity to simplify the visuals a little bit. So if people are aware of what the content pack looks today, there is like a million tabs going on right now. So what we've tried to do is, instead of 25 tabs, we've tried to aggregate information into 5 top-level pages, if you might say, on the report. And then as you go into each of these pages, you can still get all of the information that we already have on content pack today. So without much further ado, I'll actually get into an actual demo of what we have today. Could you help me with that? All right. So this is M365 Usage Analytics as it exists in the admin center. The people who can see this report are either you have to be a report reader or you have a global admin access to be able to see this data. Now, what you would notice front and center is we have an overall active users report that talks about, at the aggregated level, what is the activity of Office 365 and all the separate services that you are enabled for. And what it allows you to do is select between a 7, 30, 90, and 180-day level. So at each of these levels, you can select what is the granularity or what is the time gap in which I want to see the data. This data is available today to you. This gets refreshed on a daily basis. There's a latency of n+2 days, so we try to maintain a 48 hours SLA between when the data actually gets available and when it actually gets produced. Now, as you would notice here, as I scroll down, there is a card dedicated. What we call this is the usage dashboard. So you have a card dedicated to each of the services that you're enabled for. So you have Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Skype, Yammer, and Teams. So, and the structure of the cards, we've tried to maintain a coherence between them. So what you would notice at the top is we have, firstly, mention of the workload that's being considered, followed by what is a core activity that kind of starts to speak to the value of Microsoft 365 here. For example, on the Exchange side, we have the number of mails which were either sent or read in your entire organization in the given period. And you have a breakdown of that same activity across these. And beneath each, at the bottom of each card, what you have is what is the utilization percentage almost of active versus enabled for each of these workloads. Now, we don't want to stop here. We also want to give you aggregate level details of, user level details of how people are actually using this workload and the subscription. Now, if you come back to it, like, how would I really want to use this service, for example? So let's say we go back to John, and like he's thinking about collaboration. Like, when we start to think about modern ways in which we want to use our subscription, collaboration becomes one of the key scenarios that you want to enable for you. And it's a combination of how you are active on the cloud and how you're possibly creating content or working with content, which means when you're talking about content, you're talking about Pro Plus clients that you have. And we're talking about the cloud, we're talking about either OneDrive or SharePoint. So when John wants to start investigating what's going on in his organization, what he would do is click into the OneDrive report and go in and look at the view of what is the activity looking like for OneDrive, again, in the given period selected. Now, suppose he wants to focus on what's gone around in the last 1 month or 30 days. So what you have here is tabs explaining like each element of this report. So the first piece is accounts. So when you look at OneDrive accounts, you're thinking about these are the accounts which are there on OneDrive for your organization, and how many of you have actually been active. Now, we want to call out there's a difference between activity and having an account there. So if I have an account, I have a OneDrive site, and I share out a file with you, and you read it, you are a consumer of the file, but you're not the one who's hosting the file. So the account that becomes active in that sense would just be mine, but you would be counted as an active user. Now, both of these pieces of information would become important for John as he starts to think about what is the patterns of collaboration in the organization. Having an account mostly would speak to, am I contributing content or not? Whereas reading, if, like, say, I share it with Anthony, and then Anthony reads the document, and he said, like, he would be counted as an active user, but not necessarily contributing to it. But if I do want to look at that piece of information as well, I do have the ability to do that by going into the activity report for OneDrive, where you have the number of files which are active and also the number of users, which counts people who have or do not have an account, but they have been active on OneDrive in some way. Now, going back to like the original scenario that we were considering, we also want to look at while cloud activity and how people are working on clients. So there is a fresh report that we have launched within usage reports, which is the Pro Plus usage, which starts to talk about the core workloads of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote. This was from user feedback. This had been a big gap that we had identified over a few years. And we finally shipped this report. You should start to see this live in your subscription in a few weeks' time. And going back to like, what is the core offering of this product is, it gives you a very detailed view of how are people using this product over a period of 7, 30, 90, or 180 days. And then you start to understand how is each person using each of these products. Now, some people might look at it and think, oh, this might raise some privacy concerns because you are showing activity at a user level. So what we have, and what we have a functionality within the admin center is you can go into the admin settings and obfuscate your data. So you would still be able to see what is each user doing, but you cannot really tie it back to an actual user. So it still allows you to see what is the spread looking like of usage between your organization, but it does not really let you tie it back to one particular individual. And it totally depends on what is the use case and how you want to use your data. So, and the kind of views that we have enabled in the Pro Plus usage report is we are, again, showing you what is the number of active users across each of these workloads. And also, one sort of behavior that we wanted to talk about was how are people using Windows versus Mac. So we kind of gleaned out that difference at an aggregate level for each of these periods selected. So that kind of concludes like what I wanted to talk about in terms of like the new report. So hopefully that gives John an ability to think about how is collaboration happening in his organization. Now, going back to the Power BI piece, this is the new look of what is the Power BI template app today. So as I said, we've tried to simplify the structure here. Instead of a lot of tabs in the bottom, we've tried to consolidate everything into like 5 major tabs. We are still giving you all of the important information that was there in the Power BI content pack because we know it is of importance to a lot of our users. Some salient features of the Power BI content pack I would speak to is you have user-level details. In some cases, you have a cross-workload view as well as a workload-level view. Why am I talking about this is that in admin reports, you only have a workload-level view. Here is where we started to talk about scenarios as well, because as soon as you talk about scenarios which include multiple workloads, that's when the value of the suite starts to come out of Microsoft 365. And you would start to see some of that here as well, because we're talking about not only the product level activities here, but we're also trying to talk about what are the core scenarios that we want to enable. So we're talking about collaboration, communication, storage, mobility, and usage, besides basic adoption. Some other information that you would, again, continue to see based on what you were already seeing in the Power BI would be if you go on to product usage, you have tabs for each of these products, and you would be able to see a 12-month look back of what is the aggregate activities across each of these months. In activation and licensing, based on whatever licenses you have, so we give you a view of how many licenses have been assigned out in your organization and how many of them have actually been activated in those given periods. Another thing that is pretty unique to the Power BI that we've brought in here is the AAD information of some known AAD fields that allow you to make the data more actionable, so that if I'm talking about sales in North America, and that is the department and the region that I want to go forward, this allows you to filter that particular combination and then look at their activity in that sense, because a lot of feedback that we've received over time is that a lot of actionability comes when I can target a particular business unit and see the results at that level. So again, this thing should also go live for you in like a couple of weeks. We are also making sure the documentation is updated per whatever the new reports look like. This is all that I sort of had to talk about in terms of reports. I also wanted to do a plug around a new product that was launched on Monday. Going back to the story of when John is trying to encapsulate or articulate what is the value of Microsoft 365, we started with usage reports a few years back because we thought usage was a good proxy. Over time, the feedback that we've received is usage is good. It does cover some of the spectrum, but doesn't go the entire way, which is why we have recently launched the productivity score, where we have started to really articulate and like what is it that you're getting out from Microsoft 365. People who are possibly aware of Secure Score would also have seen this kind of an interface where we are trying to score you on what is it that you're getting out of the suite. Some quick things that you will notice here is on the right, we give you a score, which is on the scale of 100, so it easily lets you calibrate. We don't want you to leave you hanging with just a score. We want to add more color to it, which is why we give you the idea of a benchmark, which is the score of people or organizations who look like you. When we think about productivity, there's a couple of things that we consider is the interplay that's happening. The first is how are people using the products? And the second piece is how is technology enabling you to do that? And what you would see here is that these are the two score categories that are covered here under employee experience and technology experience. Under employee experience is the piece where we start to think about, from a cross-suite view, what are the behaviors that people within your organization are displaying, and those are the things that actually go into the score. The idea here is we want to make this data work for you, make it as actionable for you as possible. I'll leave you to it at this point. I would really urge you, if you want to get included, we are launching the private preview of this product in December first week. Please go sign up for the private preview. It's at aks.ms/productivity score preview. It's a simple link. The only information that we require from you is your tenant ID, and then you should see the experience live within the admin center itself. That's it. Please let me know if there are questions. Yeah. Yeah. So for the product we saw, or the so the usage analytics, we already have a graph API today. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'll repeat the question. So the question is, do we have the data available through an API? Yes, for usage reports, we already have an API for usage analytics, which is through the Microsoft Graph. You should be able to access that. For the productivity score, right now, no, because what we're trying to do is, in the private preview, figure out what are the features that we really need. So once we have a crystallized view of what the product will be, and once we GA, I think that is the right time when we would also do the work to get the API out as well. But that's where we are trying to get feedback from you guys.
Are you looking to develop data points for how your client is accessed on a mobile device? Like how often emails are read through Outlook?
Yeah, totally. In fact, we have the, so this is the piece around working from anywhere. So this talks about how people working flexibly across like different platforms. If you view details here, what you're talking about is we are looking at people who are, if people are doing email across multiple platforms or not. We are also, like at this point here, looking at an aggregate level of if people are working on email or not. Now, if you're thinking of more aggregated views are if people are reading emails or people are writing emails, those are the pieces that we were also will be definitely be including into this experience. Does that answer the?
Are you looking to go as deep as which operating system? Like, is it an Android device versus an Apple device?
We could, yeah.
Versus a web browser versus an
So we're thinking about like which web browser is that the granularity that you're looking at. Right now we were starting to like for the MVP at least we were thinking about from if you're using mobile versus web versus desktop. But if if there is like definite number of people looking for that information, we would want to provide that information as well. Totally open to that because we have the data and we would want to surface to you if that is very actionable instead of just the aggregated view. Yes.
So if we join the preview, that's what we can be providing.
Yeah, exactly. So which is why we want like you to come together so that like if we keep consistently hearing that feedback, we want to make sure that like that is addressed. Any other questions? Right. Oh.
With the product usage, will you show like who's using Word online or the client desktop version?
So the question is, with the product usage, would you show who is using Word online versus client usage? So right now, the report that we have is for Pro Plus clients. So like the value, at least, that Pro Plus brings to you is the desktop client because when you think about from what you're paying for versus what you're using, that was the first information that we thought was useful. But again, if you see value in that, totally taking that feedback and we can supplement that information as well. That'll become a broader report of like Office clients and not really Pro Plus. because Pro Plus is the thing that we have the client behind the paywall. So, but again, if that is important information, we'd be certainly providing that and take that feedback. Anything else? Or all right, thank you guys.